Hello and welcome. My name is Nicholas and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm doing my initial impressions of the manga series Lovecom, aka Lovely Complex. I originally read this series back in college, and I have been kind of meaning to reread it ever since I started this channel 4 years ago, I guess at this point, and this meets the reader romance manga criteria. I figured I should dive back in, tackle a reread, and take on this challenge all in one go. To do an overview of the need-to-know basics, Lovecom was created by Aya Nakahara, who is the author and illustrator, and it was translated for the North American market by Pookie Rolfe, which is an awesome name. The series is 17 volumes long in total, which isn't that long, and has also been adapted into an anime series, a PlayStation 2 game, and a live-action movie, which all seem to have been generally well received. There is apparently a sequel, but maybe just one volume. Anyway, very short, and it does not appear to have been translated into English. A comedy romance shoujo manga set in high school, Lovecom originally started life in 2001, being serialized in the monthly Japanese magazine Batsatsu Margaret. It ran in North America from 2007 till 2010, being published by Viz's Shoujo Beat imprint. In 2004, it received the Shogakukan Manga Award for Shoujo Manga. And if I'm mispronouncing it and you know how to pronounce it, please let me know. Flipping over to the back of this first volume and reading the description, it goes as follows. Riza Koizumi is the tallest girl in class, and the last thing she wanted is the humiliation of standing next to Atsushi Otoni, the shortest guy. Fate and the whole school have other ideas, and the two find themselves cast as the unwilling stars of a bizarre romantic comedy duo. Rather than bow to the inevitable, Riza and Atsushi join forces to pursue their true objects of affection, but in the quest for love, while their budding friendship becomes something more complex? I feel like based off of this description and genre expectations, I really don't have to put a spoiler warning. As a cisgendered female who was bullied in school for her height and often found herself crushing unrequitedly on much shorter people in school, it's not hard to guess why I really like this series the first time I read it. Having kind of given up on the high school romance shoujo thing, I've got a lot less patience in general for what I could term shoujo hijinks, I guess. Having reread this volume, I do feel like the setup for the arc from frenemies to will they won't they to BFGF has been fairly well set up, but I might be blinded by nostalgia and the fact that I want to like this book. It is a classic they only fight because they are destined to be together plot, but since we're setting them up as characters who are physical opposites and who still have a lot in common personality and interest-wise, I feel like this is still different than the worst cliches of that particular plot device and do feel fairly realistic. Not that shoujo needs to be realistic, and I'm totally there in spirit with all the incredibly amazingly imaginative and out there high school romance comedy shoujo manga. But since this is an otherwise fairly realistic manga set in the real world, I do think it gets some points for seeming emotionally believable. The one real issue so far that I've run into is that there's a couple times that the characters bring up biological essentialism, I guess, when it comes to gender and genitalia. It's been overall, a lot of the humor centers around the ways in which the two characters subvert a lot of gender stereotypes. And generally this is in good, positive fun, but there was one point where Risa was trying to egg on Otoni to some sort of bootstrapping, you go get that girl sort of thing. And she brought up the fact that since he had a penis, he was obviously a man. So that's not necessarily an assumption you should just bandy around, because it's not true. But one of the only reasons that I did notice it and was keeping an eye out for this sort of thing was not because I'm an amazing person who notices everything, but because there is actually a transgender plot that comes in later in the series that made me deeply uncomfortable at the time that I initially read the series. Because, dear watchers, I was not raised in a terribly LGBTQ friendly environment, and I did follow that sort of anti-LGBTQ thought process until a few years out of college. And so while now I identify as a queer individual in a lot of different ways, and am much more like open and affirming to everyone's gender identities, I was not necessarily when I initially read this series. And so I really wanted to revisit it and see how I felt about it now, and kind of just dig into the ways that gender were at play in this series. My initial suspicion at this point, if my memory serves me correct, is that this is actually a point that the characters will grow on, and it's not necessarily a belief of the authors that's slipping into the book, but as I said, a character belief that they will outgrow. But I don't know. I'll be back to you on that. And this concludes my initial thoughts. A new addition to these videos is talk about some points that I will be looking at going forward, to try and keep myself more on track and kind of have more of a point to this whole shenanigans deal. So I have 3 items with LoveCom that I really want to keep an eye on going forward. One, that there is that issue of gender and how it plays out through the rest of the series. 2 is emotions. A lot of people who were talking positively about this series really liked the emotional realism and emotional depth of the characters, and how much emotion was on display as compared to some other romantic comedies. So I would like to commentate on that. And then 3 is shoujo cliches, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a while since I had really read much shoujo. It's probably more recently than I'm remembering, but like deliberately read a high school romance shoujo. So I would like to make a list of the things that happen in shoujo manga. So that's all, folks. Since this is a bit of an older series, I guess, I expect a lot of people have already read these books. So feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. And while you're at it, why don't you tell me what your favorite shoujo manga is? In case I feel terribly inspired or something. I do think it is a much maligned genre, as most genres focused on women are. And so I do think it's important to not stigmatize it, even if it's not everyone's cup of tea. So anyway, bye. And as always, I would like to acknowledge that for the most part, all of my videos are filmed and produced on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit, an Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation, land covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant.